third Q&A,
C'est la troisième session questions-réponses.
the penultimate study. Only one more study after that? After this?
Moi en français. Vous savez pas? Sorry. I forgot to connect on Zoom to the French.
If you're a translator on Zoom, you need to inform us if this gets too fast for you to keep up. We don't need to translate that because all the translators know English. Hopefully. Just ask for Dean. We just need internet access, please. Tell us when you're ready. Yes? I want to welcome everybody to study number 12. On the schedule, we have one more study to go.
Sur notre planning, nous avons encore une réunion à la suite de ça.
So, just to let everybody know,
Donc pour vous le faire savoir,
we've run out of time to share all the information that we would want to share with you.
on n'a pas assez de temps pour partager toutes les informations qu'on aurait voulu partager,
But we don't intend to rush either.
mais on ne veut pas non plus aller trop vite.
So unless we can have another study,
Donc à moins d'avoir une autre étude,
we won't be able to answer all the questions that we feel need to be asked.
on ne pourra pas répondre à toutes les
Answered.
questions qu'on pense doivent être répondues.
So we have two studies.
Donc on a deux études.
Curtis is going to take approximately the first half of this study,
Curtis va prendre la première moitié de cette étude
and he's going to explain something about the relationship between Panium and the Sunday law.
et il va expliquer le lien entre Parminder et la loi du dimanche.
After that, we'll have a Q&A.
Après ça, on aura une session questions-réponses.
Yesterday, I didn't let anybody from the congregation ask questions.
Hier, je n'ai laissé à personne dans la congrégation la possibilité de poser des questions.
For the second half, I'll let you ask questions.
Et là, aujourd'hui, c'est dans la deuxième partie que je vous laisserai poser des questions.
But please think about what you're asking.
Mais s'il vous plaît, pensez à ce que vous demandez.
Second presentation today.
La deuxième présentation aujourd'hui
We hope to have Arjan for the first half doing a presentation,
la première partie sera présentée par Arjan
and the second half we'll let you know what we're going to be doing.
et la deuxième partie, on vous laissera savoir ce qu'on fera par la suite.
But it may end up being another presentation.
Mais ça pourrait être une autre présentation ou pas.
Okay? So Curtis is going to explain this issue.
Curtis va expliquer donc son point.
Before he does that, I just want to give a bit of an introduction,
Avant de faire ça, je voudrais juste donner une petite introduction.
and we're going to pray first.
Et d'abord, je prie.
Let's open with a word of prayer.
Commençons par la prière.
Holy God, we thank you
Cher Seigneur, nous te remercions,
that even in our frailty as human beings,
puisque même dans notre fragilité en tant qu'être humain,
you are so gracious.
tu es malgré tout plein de grâce.
We make excuses.
Tu nous excuses,
We try to pretend we're good when we're bad.
nous posons des excuses, nous essayons de dire que nous allons bien alors que nous n'allons pas bien.
Despite all of our bad behavior,
Et malgré tous nos mauvais comportement.
the thing that's consistent
Une chose est cohérente et qui est toujours présente.
is your warmth, your affection, and your love for us.
C'est ta chaleur, ta bonté, ton affection envers nous.
May we learn that from you
Nous l'apprenons de toi.
in how we treat one another and how we better understand the time in which we're living. In Jesus' name, amen. So, this conversation is about the relationship between Panium and the Sunday law, 2021 and 2024. We've already stated that Panium is the war between the King of the North and the King of the South. The Sunday law is the war between the King of the North and the glorious land. And that means there is a break in this line. So what we are required to do is to find a connection to the waymark of Panium using symbolic methodology, so that at Panium, or 2021, we will have the King of the North against the glorious land. If you don't do that, then this doesn't work. And if this doesn't work, the relationship between 21 and 24, it becomes very difficult to understand what is happening at the Sunday law, to even know that it exists. We know that this is the formalization and we believe that the formalization is another word for saying the agitation, which means you're living in a time period where you can see something happening that foretells the future or is a harbinger of the future. And what we can see is January the 6th. So that's the task that we're confronted with. And we're going to show you how we believe this problem can be resolved. So that we can get to a place that we have the King of the North and the glorious land in 2021, predicting the Sunday law. I'm finished now. I'm finished now.
Oh, testing. Test. I can finally say happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath. So, throughout the week, in each of the studies that have been shared, have been littered signs pointing to what we're trying to package together. And a key basis for all of that is what we just call methodology. But there's two specific areas of methodology that we've chosen to focus on. Structure and symbology. So understanding how structure and symbology work, at least from my perspective, helps to resolve this issue of where January 6th comes from. Because Ellen White talks about this time period called the agitation in quite a nebulous fashion. But we need prophetic structures that can solidify that concept. So, Elder Terrie made the point that each of the 5 proofs that we've gone through come from the book of Daniel. And one of the proofs that I shared was about this agitation to the Sunday law. And someone pointed out, where's January 6th at Panium? Because you have this waymark, and everyone just refers to it as Panium. But we know that a waymark has many names or many symbols that are going to give us different perspectives of that waymark. So we need to find the perspective of the King of the North against the glorious land. So I'm going to go back to that history in Daniel 11, in the first half of that chapter, where we're introduced to 2 kingdoms that arose after Alexander's kingdom broke up. So our story begins in verse 7. I won't read the verses, but I'll just give you the tags so when you go through them, you know where we are. So verse 7. The king of the south is going to go against the king of the north and is going to defeat them. And then we go to verse 10. I'm not going to describe the literal history of that. But in verse 10, the king of the north, in retaliation, is going to come back against the king of the south. And is going to win that encounter. Then history carries on, and we get to verse 11, where the king of the south is going to be moved with choler and is going to fight against the king of the north. And he's going to bring a great army to do that. That's what we refer to as the Battle of Raphia. So I hope in your minds you know where we are in history. And then finally, in verse 13, the king of the north is going to return and fight against the king of the south. and the king of the north is going to be victorious. And then that's the Battle of Panium. I'm going to skip the verse because verse 15 describes that same history about what the king of the north is doing against the king of the south. And it says the king of the north takes the fenced cities around the king of the north takes the fenced cities around the king of the south. And then verse 16 brings us to what I've spoken about already, where Pompey is going to go into the glorious land. So before talking about verse 14, the description of these encounters gives us hooks that we can relate to the story that's going on in Daniel 11 verse 40. And 41. So we start off in 1798, 1989, and verse 16 as the Sunday law. Because in verse 16, we have the king of the north, Rome, going into the glorious land. And verse 41, we have the king of the north going into the glorious land. So we know we can hook those two histories together. In verse 10, it talks about the king of the north overflowing and passing over the king of the south. Which relates to what we read in verse 40, where the king of the north overflows and passes over the king of the south. And then back one, we see the hook between verse 7 and 79. That's how we come up with these two waymarks in our history. But baked into this story of Panium, between verse 13 and verse 15, we're introduced to a new power. In those verses, 13 and 15, you have these two empires. In Egypt, Ptolemy, and the north of this geographical area called Coal Syria. In this area of Coal Syria, Judea is right in the middle. And then verse 14 introduces us to someone new. So I'm going to read that verse. It talks about this struggle against the king of the south. And then I'll read the last bit in full. So while I'm reading it, the translators can pull up that verse. It says, "Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall." So at the same time when this Battle of Panium is happening, in the year 200 BC, I think. Someone can correct me about the year. But at the same time that that's happening, the robbers of thy people are rising up. We could do a word study to find out who the robbers of thy people are. But I'm just going to say it as fact that it's Rome. So Rome is rising, and there's an issue that's going on between the king of the north and the king of the south. And Rome says, I can be the protector for you. I can solve all your problems. That's how they insert themselves into world politics. The area that is being contested, as I said, is this geographical area called Coal Syria. You should remember this from past studies that a certain teacher taught about Elder Tess. She taught about Coal Syria and how important it was as a geographical area. And Judea, the glorious land, is right in the middle of that geographical area. So at this point in time, Rome is saying that I can take care of you. And then years later, some events happen between 200 BC and 63 BC. But then you get to 63 BC, and Pompey comes, and he gets involved directly in Judea and becomes the protectorate over Judea. He enters into the glorious land. So all the way back in 200 BC, when Rome is rising, Judea, the glorious land, could have foreseen that something bigger is coming in the future. But it doesn't stop there. That's one perspective of how you can see Rome getting involved with the glorious land. In that history of Panium, that points forward to the work that Rome is going to do against the glorious land in 63 BC. But as described with structures, you can use hooks to join histories together that have nothing to do with each other. So in Aldertes's past studies, she looked at the Battle of Panium and saw that there's this altercation between the king of the north and the king of the south. And through Acts 27, the story of Pyrrhus opens up. And you get histories that parallel this story of the king of the north and the king of the south. So if you just, because I need to change the scene, if you remember that the context of our conversation is the Battle of Panium, this waymark before the Sunday law. Could you? So I've got this picture. so that I don't have to draw it all out again. But if you remember Pyrrhus and his wars against Italy and Macedonia, you have this event in the story of Macedonia. In the year 287 BC, we would line that up with the Battle of Panium. I'm not going to prove that now, just for time's sake. And then in the story of Italy, you have the story of Beneventum, the Battle of Beneventum. So these are hooks that were used to combine these different layers of history until we get to World War II. Up until now, we've only seen the King of the North fighting against the King of the South. That's the story. So where does this idea of the King of the North fighting against the glorious land come from? And what we see in World War II is that Germany has two oppositions: the Eastern Front and the Western Front. So as you can see in this third line, Germany rises up and then it's going to go to war, and it's going to fight against these nations that come into an alliance, where once Poland is invaded, and that begins this war, say, on the Western Front. It was literally west of Germany. But then Germany has to fight against another opposition on its eastern borders. It's fighting against Russia, the King of the South in that history. So we skip through some history and we get to the waymark that we want to investigate. 1945. I want to pause there to remind us of a principle that becomes important in how we understand prophecy. And it's this idea of alpha and omega histories, where a work is tried to get accomplished in an alpha history, but fails, so an omega history becomes necessary to succeed that work. So when you look at these 4 lines, the lines that are highlighted in yellow are your alpha histories, which are histories of failure, and the ones that are not highlighted are your histories of success. So let's explore 1945 with that in mind. That this is a history of failure for the King of the North, specifically in these battles that lead up to 1945. So what happens in 1945 is that the King of the South, Russia, is going to join the Allies on the Western Front, and the key nation that's the face of these allies is the USA, the glorious land. But what happens then is that Germany is defeated by this alliance. these resistors against the king of the north. But what do we need to do with a history of failure when we come to a history of success? Say, you have to flip it. Because remember, the king of the north has failed. So when you're making application in our history, the king of the north succeeds. In 1945, Russia joins these allies, which lines up with Panium. And then the next waymark, 1989, which would line up with the Sunday Law. The king of the south, Russia, eventually does lose. So the battles that you switch are all those pre the Sunday Law. I know it's a bit confusing, so I want to ensure that we're on the same page. So does anyone have any questions up till now? Does anyone have a question up till now? Before we continue. Okay, no. Okay, no questions yet. So, we take that history, and now we're going to go back to our board work. Okay? Which bit specifically? So I'm going to summarize briefly. We have these 4 lines that have opened up in relationship to the king of the north versus the king of the south. That's the primary story that these lines are telling us. What we want to investigate is the relationship between Panium and the Sunday Law. So in each of these histories, we go to the waymark that lines up with Panium because they've been hooked together by this altercation between the king of the north and the king of the south. World War II is one of those histories where we get more information that none of the other lines give us. All we've understood is the king of the north versus the king of the south. But now we want to understand the king of the north versus the glorious land. And we can't just create that out of thin air. So we have to get a history that demonstrates that. And it's World War II. That's going to join on to all these other stories of the king of the north and the king of the south. An important detail about doing this is understanding how alpha and omega histories work. Histories of failure and histories of success. You can still learn something from those histories of failure. But to learn something, you have to change the victors if you want to make correct application in a history of success. So here in 1945, it looks like the king of the south and the glorious land are defeating Germany, the king of the north. But when we come to our history, a history of success, we flip it. So the king of the north is defeating both of these entities. And that should point to what's coming next. In the history of World War II, that would be 1989. And for us, the Sunday Law. So coming back to our story about present day, we look at this year of Panium and we ask ourselves the question, sorry. The king of the north coming against the glorious land. What does that look like? And for 3 days, I've tried to emphasize the fact that this is an ideological warfare. So when we start looking at January 6, 2021, and we see riots, we need to be sure of what we're looking for. Is the story a physical takeover that would mark the victory of the King of the North? Or is there something that's happening that's ideological that would mark what we would call a deadly wound against the glorious land? So when we investigate the rise of this entity with an ideology, how we start defining warfare is going to determine what we expect here at the Sunday Law as the agitation. And hopefully, later in the day, we'll learn something new.
We appreciate. We all appreciate that what was just demonstrated is not straightforward. But neither is it complicated, and it's not new. But it answers the question how you take 21 that's Panium, and that you can show that there's a parallel history, that you can see that the King of the North is coming against the glorious land. How do we get back to that previous picture? Something was mentioned yesterday about internal death, Valny, and the failure of the King of the South. So some people didn't understand the explanation of that. I'm not suggesting this is any better, but if you've understood what Curtis said, Russia and the West, when they were not in unity with one another, it's likely that Germany could have won. So when they form an alliance, that dooms Germany to failure. So if we can see that alliance causes the failure of the King of the North, so Russia needs to, or it's the Soviet Union then, but Russia needs to look like the West. They need to come into, to be one. You all know the Second World War well enough to understand that as a concept. So if you think about internal death or what Navalny wanted to do into our history, if that change had happened in Russia, they would have joined what I'm just going to call the West. And if that had happened, even if you can't conceptualize it literally, how it would happen, you can see prophetically the joining of the West and the South ensures the defeat of the King of the North. You can all see that. So if that had happened in our history, all you need to envisage is Russia turning into a Western country with Western values. And even if you don't understand the fulfillment of what that would look like, you can all see prophetically that it works. And I don't think we're suggesting that Navalny was the person to do all of that work. Rather, he becomes a symbol of that necessary work. Because that failed, then it's the opposite of what happened in World War II. And now the South and the West aren't going to join together. And therefore, the King of the North will win now. So this is that concept of internal death or the death of Navalny. So I hope that may help based upon what we just learnt this morning. Another point I want us to bear in mind, which is going to be developed this evening, is that we keep on focusing on the concept of ideology. This is just me. I want us to think when we say ideology is thoughts, not actions. That's what we want you to understand. If you just hold that in your thoughts, this distinction between thoughts and actions will be explained. So this is not an attempt of an answer, but I just want to point out that in our movement, there has been this discussion about the role of Biden fighting against Putin over Ukraine. And it looks seductively like the King of the North and the King of the South warring over the proxies. Some people have used that idea to question. I don't want to frame it in a combative way. Maybe I do. Because they use that as evidence to suggest what we're teaching is wrong. So this is not an answer, but just so that you're aware, Ukraine war is action, not thoughts. And what you've heard from us this week is that this is a warfare between Trump and Putin. And Putin's actions in supporting Trump caused Russia's demise. I mentioned yesterday, I think, in the Rise and Fall of Nations, that human beings, societies, they want to improve. They want a better lifestyle at a personal level. And the only way you're going to do that is by following the golden rule, or at the political level to gravitate to democracy. So this struggle between democracy and other forms of government is a human inevitability outside of Satan and God. Humans will do that. They will come together, and over time, they will come to a realization of a better form of government. And every time that fails, you will always get a revolution. So think in your minds, I shouldn't say that, this war between Biden and Putin, I'm going to suggest, coincidentally happens at the same time there's another war going on between Trump and Putin. And you have to ask yourselves, which is the correct track or path? Because the thought or the ideology, the ideological war, looks very similar to this actionable war or this physical war that's going on. And does the fact that the Democrat administration go to war against Russia is that actually evidence or proof that Biden, in some shape or form, is the seventh kingdom? Because that's what's at issue. So we don't have time to develop that, otherwise we won't give you an opportunity to ask questions. So 2 points in summary. I've tried to give a further explanation of the failure of Russia, which is symbolized. It's not is, it's symbolized by the death of Navalny and Biden and the Democrats in going to war against Russia is not proof that we've misunderstood the relationship between the Sixth and Seventh Kingdoms. Just calling what the Ukraine war is a battle between the King of the North and the King of the South does not answer the question. The answer is a bit more complicated than that. So it's over to you now. Opportunity to ask questions. If it's a general question, that's fine. If it's specific to a person, state that. Off the list of. Because yesterday people complained I didn't like them. They complained I didn't let them speak. That's it. I know. Only the questions that we've spoken in class. Put your hands up high. The mic's over there.
Who is the King of the North and the Glorious Land in 2021?
What's the question?
Who is the King of the North and the Glorious Land in 2021? King of the North fights against the Glorious Land.
We can just answer this simply. Come here. We'll just give the answer without any explanation.
Donald Trump.
In the glorious land?
Who
King.
is the king of... Oh, and the glorious
Yeah.
land. It's the Sixth Kingdom. It's the USA.
Donald Trump is the King of the North. The United States is the glorious land. Pass the mic over. Ask
What
a
i-
question.
What is the application for the beast and the woman in this dispensation?
I'm going to try to answer that this afternoon. Yeah? Yeah. There was the hand over there first.
Okay, my question has to do with Navalny and
Just ask
Putin.
your question, please.
Uh, Putin, we have identified Putin Putin as restraining the King of the North before. I want to understand how, okay, comparing Navalny and Putin, because we identified that Navalny would have aligned with the West. We have identified that Navalny would have aligned with the West and therefore stood against the King of the North. So Putin was not aligned with the West.
What's your question?
Okay, it's fine.
Everything that you've stated is a repeat of what we've said. But what's your question?
How was Putin restraining the king of the north if he was not aligned with the West? I don't know if you understand my question.
How was Putin restraining the king of the north?
If he was not aligned with the West, because we have never seen him aligned with the West.
Are you familiar with the Munich Security Council?
Yes.
We'll assume not.
No, I am.
Oh.
You are, okay. So Putin has been ideologically against the rise of the United States taking the role of the world's being the world's policeman. And warned the rest of the world of what they were doing. I'm not sure. Does somebody else want to have a? Sorry?
We'll talk about Syria.
I'm branded.
Okay. We're getting tired, sorry.
I guess the one thing that I can point out, if you remember when Bush invaded Iraq,
Si vous vous souvenez, lorsque Bush a envahi l'Europe,
when this egregious action takes place,
sorry, there's a great.
Egregious.
egregious,
Bad.
bad action,
Il y a une mauvaise action qui se met en place là.
what was Putin saying?
Qu'est-ce que Poutine a fait?
What was his gripe?
Quel était le point sur lequel il se concentrait?
What was his ideology at the time? From my perspective, he was fighting against this ideology that's bad for the world. He was he had a valid argument. And then if you want to tell the story of how he gets brainwashed by Trump, then we can tell that story.
Can't answer. Mike, please.
You said, it's not my question, it's just because I don't understand exactly what you said.
What was just said
Ce qui a été dit,
was that, we'll just say Russia has a track record of, on the international stage, exerting its influence to resist the United States.
I understand this point.
donc
He said,
ce point-là, je le comprends.
he said the king of the south was fighting against that ideology,
Il a dit que
that bad ideology. So can you please explain what is this bad ideology?
In 1991, 1991, the USA double-crossed Russia and claimed to have a new world order. That's the bad ideology that Russia has been fighting against.
So you mean unilateralism?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes? Okay. Okay. So can I ask my question now or you on the...
I thought that was your question.
No, I said it was not my
Ask your question, please.
Thank you. Merci. So what is the event that mark the deadly wound and the death of the king of the south? Externally or internally, how you want to answer, because I don't get it.
Quel événement marque la blessure mortelle ou pointue des accords? Que ce soit en externe ou en interne, parce que je ne comprends pas trop. Événement et date.
Elder Terrie, and then again Elder Parminder, spent ages describing the death of Navalny as a symbol, as being the death of the king of the south. If you want a date, you can Google it.
Alors, agree. Elder Terrie, Elder Parminder spoke about the death of Navalny internally.
L'ancienne Terrie et l'ancien Parminder ont parlé de la mort de Navalny en interne.
Okay. And I think she put it in 2024. I don't remember, February 2024.
Et je crois qu'elles l'ont mis en février 2024.
But also externally on our line,
Mais également en interne, en externe sur notre ligne.
we put the deadly wound in 21, I think,
On place la blessure mortelle en 2021, je
and
crois,
the death in at Sandelo.
et la mort à la loi du dimanche.
So can you remind me, because we speak a lot about it, can you please remind me
Donc, est-ce que tu peux, s'il te plaît, me rappeler
what is the event and the date we place on our line for these two events?
quel est
Thank you.
l'événement et la date qu'on place sur la ligne pour ces deux événements?
If I remember what Elder Terry's taught before, is that everything that's happening at the Sunday law is internal. There's nothing external you see there. She chose the word external to describe what takes place at the worldwide Sunday law. My suspicion is that it may not be as straightforward as saying this is the opposite of this. So when you say external, I don't know what you have in your mind for external death. But I want to hand over to Elder Terrie
Je peux passer la main à l'ancienne Terrie,
if she has anything more to say.
savoir si elle a d'autres choses à ajouter.
No? Okay.
Alors, can I continue or not? Because I want to...
If it's on this point, we're not going to go any further, I don't think.
Je ne pense pas que sur ce point, on ira beaucoup plus loin.
And-
Okay, we'll talk about this one. Okay, no,
Yeah.
okay.
At the back, is that Elder Marco? If you've already asked a question, please let someone else choose. Have a go.
To you, Parminder, you recently made a statement on the logic or the reasoning or the or the why of these 5 studies. And I think you said it's not so much about placing the Sunday law or something, but it's about understanding the character of the king of the North. Did I understand correctly? If not, can you affirm or change?
You mentioned 5 studies. Is it that the fact that we had 5 people doing this, or is your question something different?
The 5 people.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but the reason why I think we have now moved away from having a person who defines doctrine in our movement I think this was one of the conclusions we came to in Canada, that I think God is trying to take this movement and refine it and purify it. I said yesterday, based upon a question that someone asked, I don't believe there's a line of the individual. It's a line of the institution, which means the institution needs to be perfected. And one of the things about perfecting an organization or an institution is defining how it does things, not just the answers that it gets. And that's why we've approached perhaps the most important theological question in the movement in this way, as opposed to how we did it in the past. Trying to put into practice how this movement should run. I'm not sure if that's the question that you've asked. Excellent. Put your hands up. Who's seated? Who's sitting down? Go ahead. I didn't say you. I can't see your face. Who it is?
To Elder Terrie. I wanted to find out, or maybe if you can explain the relevance of the All Souls Day. The All Souls Day. All Souls Day. When you're talking about the fava beans. How it connects with the Sunday law.
Point of the so when we consider Fabius, that name's origins was because the clan were bean farmers. It wasn't because they were involved in elections or voting. They were bean farmers. But it was no ordinary bean. That bean is the most staple crop across the Mediterranean. So in the natural, it's a bean. But it was also used, as you all understand, for voting and ballots and lotteries.
Et,
There were people that would not eat that bean,
il y avait des personnes qui ne mangeaient pas cette fève,
that their philosophy
leur philosophie,
was oligarchy, and out of principle they wouldn't eat a faba bean
principe, ils ne mangent pas de fève,
because to them it represented democracy.
ils ont fait la démocratie.
So I guess the spiritual application of faba beans
L'application spirituelle des fèves
has been known since antiquity.
est connue.
And there were people that also would not eat that bean
Personne qui ne mange pas cette fève,
because it represented to them the souls of dead people.
parce que c'est les âmes des personnes décédées.
So the connection is when we think of the word suffrage,
Là, le lien avec cela, c'est lorsqu'on pense au mot suffrage.
which is voting rights.
Vote, le droit de vote.
That word suffrage means intercession, in particular for dead people.
Suffrage veut dire l'intercession et en particulier pour les personnes mortes.
I brought up All Souls Day just to make a point
J'avais présenté donc, simple juste pour faire un point.
that it was at the earthquake, the Lisbon earthquake,
Pour présenter que donc, tremblement de terre de Lisbonne
was on All Saints Day.
s'est produit le jour de la Toussaint.
They were all in church praying for the saints.
Ils étaient tous à l'église pour prier pour les saints.
That's why they didn't see the tsunami and they all died in the collapse of the churches.
Ils sont morts lorsque l'église s'est effondrée.
The very next day is All Souls Day.
Et ils ont été donc enterrés le jour de la Toussaint.
Traditionally, that's when you plant your faba beans.
Généralement, par tradition, c'est là où on plante donc les fèves.
I don't know what it's like in the Northern Hemisphere,
Je sais pas
but where I come from, you plant your sweet peas on St. Patrick's Day.
Je sais que là où je viens, on plante les petits pois, par exemple, le jour de la Saint-Patrick.
And you plant your tomatoes on Melbourne Cup Day.
Et les tomates, on les plante le jour de la Coupe de Melbourne.
So it was the tradition to plant your faba beans on All Souls Day.
C'était une tradition de planter les fèves le jour de la Toussaint.
So there is a connection between the bean and voting
Il y a et le
and suffrage.
et le suffrage.
Suffrage being the prayers for the dead.
Suffrage étant les prières pour les morts.
Has anybody got a question who has not asked any questions at this camp?
Est-ce que quelqu'un a une question et qui n'a pas posé de questions dans ce comité jusque-là?
Besides our dear elder. Anyone put your hands up if you haven't asked a question? There's one here, and we'll do David in a moment. Justina.
Where do we mark the Trump as the king of the North? Where does Trump become the king of the North?
They've answered that, or they go. What's the answer straight away?
I'll just give the answer without explaining it.
Okay.
2016. Do you have different?
Next question. David, I think. You go faster you go, the more questions we'll get in. Put your hands up, please.
J'ai une question pour Curtis. C'est concernant la ligne de 1945. On sait que c'est une ligne d'échec.
It's a line of failure.
Alors, dans cette ligne, je ne crois pas qu'il ait cité le pays glorieux,
In this line, I don't think that the glorious land is mentioned.
sachant que l'Allemagne, c'était le roi du Nord
knowing that Germany was the king of the north.
On a la triple alliance de l'autre côté,
So we have the threefold union
avec la France, la Pologne et l'Angleterre.
with
We-
France, UK,
We
Poland.
understand the question now.
On a compris la question. C'est bon.
I guess I'm going to ask you a question.
Can you have the mic back, please?
In 1945, when the three allies, someone help me, Poland, of course. When those three allies are struggling, who comes to save the day? The USA. Who's the USA in that story?
Le pays glorieux.
I want him to answer. Oh, he did. Okay.
Le pays glorieux. Alors donc, dans cette alliance, donc, c'est les USA seulement qui vont représenter donc le pays glorieux, mais pas les trois autres.
Hence, it's only the USA who represent the glorious land.
Pas les trois autres pays, Pologne, France et l'UK.
My perspective, no.
The answer.
I said the USA equals glorious land. Is that okay?
Oui, parce qu'en fait, moi, je me disais que avec la triple alliance, en fait, est-ce que c'était cette triple alliance qui représentait le pays glorieux? Bon, on sait que les USA, oui.
The threefold union represents the glorious land.
I guess I would personally need a model to demonstrate that. What I do know is that in 1798, the Sixth Kingdom rises up, which the Time of the End magazine refers to as the glorious land. Not Poland, France, or the UK.
Merci.
Did that answer your question?
C'est bon?
Oui.
So we've got a refinement of the question asked earlier. And it's regarding Putin not being aligned to the West ideologically.
Et c'est par rapport à, sorry, it's about who?
Putin,
Par rapport à Poutine qui n'est pas allié à l'idéologie de l'Ouest.
no, he's not aligned to the West ideologically.
Pas allié avec l'Ouest.
So did Navalny need to be ideologically aligned to the West in order to restrain the King of the North?
Est-ce que donc Navalny devait être aligné idéologiquement avec l'Ouest pour vaincre le roi du Nord?
So if we just replace Putin with Russia,
Si on remplace Poutine avec la Russie,
Russia, after over 1989, 1991,
sur la période de 1929 à 81,
was no longer communist.
la Russie
Communism was not the force that was pushing their political agenda.
il poussait son agenda politique en avant.
And Russia was aligned with the West
Et la Russie était alignée avec l'Ouest.
in the sense that it was a part of the United Nations, part of the World Trade Organization.
Dans le sens où elle faisait partie des Nations Unies, elle faisait partie du commerce international mondial.
It was trading with Europe. It was fully integrated into what we would call the West.
Elle était pleinement intégrée dans ce qu'on appelle l'Ouest.
It wasn't until 2021 that I'm going to, Putin became, Putin made his country, if I say pariah or bad.
Poutine a fait que son pays ne devienne la paria et ne soit mauvais.
So we're not seeing communism versus capitalism.
Donc là, versus capitalisme.
Russia just became a flawed, corrupted capitalist society and played that game with all the other countries. And so Navalny, as a symbol, what he represented was returning Russia out of that pariah state where it could just be another functioning democracy working with all the other nations. Does that help?
Any other questions? Last one, the back, Brendan.
Is the ideology of the woman unilateralism?
At a simple level, yes. But it could be Godal ruling the world. Not having equality. Anything that you can think that's negative. But it can be summarized by unilateralism. Ruling the world. So we go back to the time period of the Tower of Babel. When you get a one world government, there's nothing to restrain the trampling of rights.
Is that why we had to get away within the movement, we had to get away from one person defines doctrine? Because that's...
If I say yes, then that gives a bad representation of our past.
But the principle is multilateralism.
Yes.
Which is why there's 4 or 5 people up there. Is that correct?
Yes. You did say the woman. I think is that what your question was?
Yes.
Just to remind us all, what Brendan actually meant was the bad woman of Revelation 17. It's not the definite article when you say the woman. I hope you all know why. Because, Brendan?
I'll hand that back to you.
How many women are there?
2.
2. So when he said the woman, that's why I hesitated. It wasn't the definition. You have to say which woman you're referring to.
Thank you.
Alluded to that in referring to the Ukraine war between Biden and Putin. Hopefully we're going to address that this afternoon. We've run out of time. We're already late for lunch. So please don't come up now. Sorry. We're to go straight to have lunch. One second then. Would Okay, you've got 10 minutes. We're gonna close with prayer, and then lunch will be around 25:30. Let's pray. Holy God, we do thank you that you can guide and direct this movement. On behalf of the teachers here, we apologize to you, to those listening if we didn't answer their questions correctly. Pray that you would continue to guide and direct our voices and our thoughts so that we may represent you better, to serve your people better, and to be a better organization, so that this institution would represent you. In Jesus' name, amen. Ready? We're ready for lunch, so